Today on another Giant Monsters Monday here on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Monsterarts Space Godzilla and Mogra. These are both characters from the 1994 film Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. And I was originally going to go along with kind of the motif I've had going of pitting up the SH Monsterarts figures against their Bandai or Bandai Creations counterparts, but realizing that these two guys fit perfectly together, I thought I'd just review them all as one unit. These are two of the first figures in the SH Monsterarts line. They basically hit Space Godzilla right off the bat and did the Godzilla 94 and then these two. But being early Monsterarts figures, that means we have a lot of accessories. So let's jump right in and check out all the stuff that comes with these figures. First up, we're going to take a look at all the stuff that comes on Mogra. Now, Mogra was basically kind of a follow-up to Mechagodzilla in this movie. Mechagodzilla was the movie before this, and it was very successful for Toho. So I guess they thought it'd be perfect to go with another robotic giant kaiju kind of filling in with that theme. But Mogra was based off a character from the 60s in Toho, a similarly named giant robot called Mogra from the film The Mysterians. And just as a warning to other giant monster fans out there, if you haven't watched The Mysterians, it's not a bad movie, but don't watch it for Mogra because he's barely in the thing. But fresh out of the box, this figure comes in kind of his normal mode, but we get all the parts to turn Mogra into his flying mode. We get an additional neck piece to replace the one that's already on the figure, two little side wings that will add stability to him while he's flying, and an additional back fin. To put this all together, we could pop Mogra's whole neck off and then remove the head from that. We'll then peg the head onto the new neck, so now we have him looking straight up, very much like the Mechagodzilla figure I've already reviewed. And then that will just plug right back on top of the figure. Down here at his hips, he has these little circular panels, and these are actually really simple and cool in the way they remove. You kind of press in on the upper section of them, and they'll rotate outwards. Then you can just pull them right off. And then each one of these side pieces is keyed, so you can't put it in backwards, and they will just peg right into place. So now we have the lower stabilizers. And last but not least, here on Mogra's tail, we have a little panel up here that we can pry off. And then our additional fin just plugs right into place. And some slight playing with the articulation, and we have Mogra in flight mode. He's got his head out, his arms tucked back, and everything all nice and lined up. His boosters here at the back. He's ready to go. Now, of course, this figure doesn't come with any kind of flying stand. There is the Tamashii flight stage, which should work with this, I believe. But I don't think most people will show off their Mogra in flight mode. Mogra also has a few extra accessories for his body. These hands, or whatever you call these, are just plain. They are statically posed, they're permanently shut, but they will just simply slide off of the figure like so. And then we could add on some new pieces that at first appear to be the same, but then you could open them up on hinges to reveal the spiral missile inside. So the really cool Mogra weapon from the movie is right in there. And these are the hands I'll probably display them with 99.9% of the time. If you were doing the flight pose or something else, it might be kind of cool to have the ones that aren't going to open. They're a little more accurately sculpted because they don't have the hinges showing here at the top. But I'm also going to have him with his spiral missiles in effect. Also, on the back here, you can raise up his kind of backpack. You can see a little peg sticking out the back. If we push that forward, it will loosen up his center torso piece. You can pry that out. And then you can replace it with his laser or maser cannon. This is also keyed. There is a little key here at the top of his body and a nice groove on the cannon itself. So those will plug together. And now he has the cannon coming right out of the middle of his torso. So that's a pretty cool effect. It's well sculpted, pretty cool looking. Mogra also comes with not one, but two effect stand pieces, and they're really cool. This one is just basically a little city intersection. We have the lines on the road, some different dirt or stone patterns here, and some concrete around. Not the best detailing on it, but works. It's beveled on all four sides and kind of grayish, yellowish plastic, which is not my favorite color they could have made this, but it works simply enough. Hollow on the bottom side. And of course it has a peg on it to put in one of the old Tamashii arms. This is, like all the other ones, has the hinge at the bottom. It can also swivel in the base, a mid hinge, and then a hinge at the very, very top. And to plug into that, we have the laser or maser effect. This is it. It has a nice burst that will go around the center of the torso. And then the kind of digital looking beam that's multicolored, very similar to what we had on Mechagodzilla. Now, one thing I am just now noticing with this piece, and I don't know if it was like this from the start or if it's happened while he's been on display, but you can kind of see there's a slight downward arc to it. And I'm wondering if, especially here where it's thin, it's starting to bend under its own weight. Not really much you could do about that, but kind of a bummer. I might have to treat it with some hot water or something. You can see the hole is right there where it pegs into the stand. So we'll just peg those two together, and we have the effect. We can take our figure and then just line that effect up with it. And it's pretty cool looking. Definitely nice to have beam weapons. Something that's been sorely missing from some of the more recent Monsterarts figures. So very happy to have that on this guy. But wait, there's more. Our other base is a little more intricate, same beveled side, same main color, but we have some little buildings and some larger buildings in the background. So that's really cool. Something you gotta have with your Godzilla figures is some buildings for them to stomp and trash, and this is really nice looking. Not as detailed as I would have loved it to be, but still cool. And this has two holes on it for two Tamashii arms, so those will peg right in there. And then Mogra comes with a two-stage missile effect. We have two nearly identical first stages, and these have big thick pegs that will plug into his arms, and a nice plume of smoke. It's a translucent gray plastic with some whitish smoke painted over top of it, giving a really nice effect. And then at the end here we have two smaller keyed pegs, and these will peg into our two second stages, so just the same kind of idea, more of the smoke, same paint job. But here at the end we have the translucent reddish orange flame effect, and also this one has the holes in the bottom, so you actually peg this part into the stand. So then to complete this all, we would open up Mogra's arm here and remove the spiral missile. And then the most nerve-wracking thing with this figure is you actually have to separate the spiral missile from this back peg, and it's basically an adapter to go from the width of the arm to the size of the peg hole in the missile. And you just have to set this aside somewhere where you're not going to lose it, because it's a tiny little battleship peg, and yeah, I can see this going away real quick. So now to finish everything up, you peg these two spiral missiles into the flame effect, so now we have a nice look of them blasting off towards their target. We use the keyed ports here and back and line them up with the keys on the main part of the smoke. We get our stands here, and peg the smoke effect into that. Then what we end up with is a really cool launch effect that is way too big for my backdrop right now, but it's really cool. I like the way they painted the smoke. It looks authentic, about as good as you could possibly hope to get out of plastic, and it works really well. But there is one extra thing you could do with these that is most likely intentional, but something I haven't seen done quite so much. We can actually take back off these rear sections and then take the pegs that were attached to the spiral missile and insert them in here. And this will let us adapt to a shorter version of the spiral missile firing sequence. So you don't have to take up quite as much room to get the full effect. We just have this nice shorter version, which is how I've been displaying the figure on my setup. So enough with all the extras, onto the figure itself. The sculpt on here is pretty good. I really like the way the head came out. It has the big bug eyes. They have a yellow translucent plastic over top with kind of a honeycomb effect inside. There's the red painted up here. The drill nose on here, the kind of blue metallic pieces going on all of his joints, his neck, his shoulders. Nice silver sheen to this, very similar to the Mechagodzilla. It's got the big saw blade back here, the kind of rocket boosters. The arms have that quintessential robotic kind of bendy part in there that you know they're just cheating the joint and making it so the actor can move underneath. The hands on here are pretty well sculpted, as I said before. Really doesn't lose too much in my eye when it's the movable versions versus the solid versions, but they work either way. Some nice details here in the chest. Very movie accurate here, as you'd expect with Monsterarts. Some more orangey red lights there. The entire lower torso, big kind of Japanese style skirt. And the big treaded feet. These feet down here, the actual bottom part, is die cast, so it weights the figure a lot and keeps him bottom heavy, which is great. I love that. Going around back here, we have his tail. His tail is actually a separate piece. You could pull it off. Haven't found much of a reason for doing this outside of just maybe keeping it from breaking or something, but very simple. Then it has the thruster back here. We have red translucent thrusters on the bottom of the feet as well. For articulation, Mogra is a little limited. His head will move slightly side to side, no real up and down, just barely. It's on a ball joint, but you don't get much out of it. The drill for the nose will actually spin, which took me off guard. Shoulders will do full 360, go in and out to the side. The shoulder plate's on its own hinge, so you can kind of move that how you need it. The elbows will hinge forward and back. They look like they should be able to rotate side to side, but mine are very stiff, so I'm not going to chance it. The hands will rotate at the peg. It has a ball joint at the waist, a little forward and back, but mostly just side to side. Hindered by the sculpt though. The legs can move forward and back, once again severely hindered by the skirt. Can bend just a little bit at the knee. And then we have a ball joint at the foot. And the tail can hinge forward and back at the top. And then also here it could hinge and rotate at the mid joint. One last thing to point out on this figure is that in the film, M.O.G.U.E.R.A can split into two separate units. And when I first got him, I kind of thought he might actually have the ability to transform because it seems like all the parts are there. The ball joint at the waist lets you pop the top off and kind of feels like you could start moving things around. This back panel that could come out and hinge, it seems like it should be able to do that for more than just access to be able to pop out the chest piece, but it really seems to be the only point. And the way the tail moves and everything on here just looks like it should transform, but I have not been able to find a way to make it happen, and I'm not going to push this figure to its limits to try to get it to happen, but it really looks like it could have done it. I wouldn't be surprised if sometime down the line when the Monsterarts line's been a little more exhausted, that they might go and do this as like a web exclusive and have the 2-pack of the vehicle mode of M.O.G.U.E.R.A. Next up, we're going to look at Space Godzilla. And first off, before I go anywhere else with it, as I said, I was originally thinking about putting him up against his Bandai Creations version, the only other Space Godzilla I own, but I realized it's going to be almost impossible to make a fair comparison between these two. Most of the time, the Bandai Creation is definitely lacking far from what the Monsterarts puts into him, but this Bandai Creation Space Godzilla is an all-around awful figure. So I'm just going to bypass this one completely. Maybe another Giant Monsters Monday I'll cover him for something, but you can go ahead and rest assured that this Bandai Creation, the American Bandai release, is a crummy figure. Now Space Godzilla does have his own effects parts, so let's look at that real quick. We have another kind of display-based style effects pad. This is meant to look like the island where he fights little Godzilla. It has all the crystals coming out. They're translucent with a silvery paint over top, which looks really good. Same old Tamashii arm here plugs in. Now this doesn't plug in very deep because of the sculpt on the base, so you kind of have to be careful because it has a tendency to pop out. And then we have Space Godzilla's Corona Beam, a translucent plastic with gold over top. Looks very, very cool. It's kind of splitting here, arcing. I really like this one. Has a nice burst effect where it will come out of his mouth and kind of a retainer shape to fit in there. Our peg on it is down here, up at the front on one of the arms. So we can peg that into place. We bring it in, wedge it in Space Godzilla's mouth, and it makes a really cool looking effect. I really like this Corona Beam. Very cool looking. But there's another kind of cheat you could do with this base. Now it's kind of hard to do and you have to mess with a lot to get it there, but if you play with it enough, you could position him over top of these crystals in a way that looks like he's kind of hovering over them. Then you could add the breath effect in there and just kind of have this flying Space Godzilla look that I think is really cool. As for the figure itself, I absolutely love what they've done here. Space Godzilla is a little bit of a goofy design, but they've really brought him to life in a really menacing way. The head just has that very sinister look to it. He has the extra teeth back here. The mouth is very long and crocodilian looking. The crystal on top of his head is a nice translucent orange and yellow. Has the kind of silvery spines going down his back. All these spines have a pearlescent, translucent quality to them, especially these big crystals on his shoulders, which blend in with the skin really nicely. It's got that big purpley armored looking chest. And one thing they have kind of skimped on here is the width of Space Godzilla. In the film, he had kind of wider hips. He was a little fatter looking. They've slimmed him down, made him a little more aggressive, but I really like the slight tweak to him. He's also a nice greenish blue color where he's not purple. His claws look really nice, very nice detail on the kind of crystal looking fingertips on it. Same with the toenails down here. I love the purple at the base of them. On the shoulder here, there is a little sliding piece so that if you move the arm in or out, you can actually slide this to fit with it and kind of cover up gaps in the sculpt. He has a double jointed elbow that doesn't give you a whole lot of movement, but does give you some. You can also swivel side to side of that joint. Have a ball joint at the wrist with a good range of motion. He has a mid-torso ball joint, which you don't get a whole lot out of. You can go a little forward and back, a little side to side, but very hindered by the dorsal plates. The legs are on ball joints, so they can move in and out a little bit, forward and back a little bit, not a lot. Can bend at 2 points at the knee, not very far either, a little bit of rotation there as well. And then a ball joint at the foot and the ankle, so you can move it very far, forward, back, side to side, pivot it, whatever you want to do. As you can see here, the tip of my tail has once again fallen off, but we'll look at the articulation here. It's ball jointed, multi-segmented through here. You get a great range of motion, very stiff joints so they hold their position very well. And since this is a part and we can look at it, there's actually little sleeves like this piece here that fit in between the joints. And then the tail will peg in on the other side. And that's how the tail is made up. It's basically some ball joint pieces and some floating pieces that give it that effect. It's nice, but I guess it makes the ball peg a little shallower than it should be to really hold these joints well. Maybe a little heat could help solve my problem here, get the joint in just that little bit further and make it really lock in, but I have yet to get to that. So overall, I really like these two figures. I think they're really great. Space Godzilla is my absolute favorite of the two. The sculpt on him is just really mean, really vicious looking, and even though it's not perfectly movie accurate, I love the take that they've gone with on him. His accessory's decent, and the sculpt and paint is great. The tail is the only real complaint I have about him, but he's gonna get the cult classic status. M.O.G.U.E.R.A, not such a cool looking piece as far as design goes, but that's Toho's fault. That's not Bandai or Monsterarts or any of them's fault. But he comes with so much stuff, and he was the average price for one of these figures, so he's definitely great value for the money on him. You can have him in his normal mode, you can have him flying, you get missiles, you can do different length attacks with him, you get the chest cannon. Just way, almost too much stuff to go on this figure, which just makes him really freaking cool. So he also gets the cult classic status. As I've already mentioned, Bandai Tamashii Nations did a Monsterarts Godzilla from '94. That is what their Heisei style Godzilla that I've already reviewed is based on. There are minor differences in the suits in the 90s and late 80s, so it kind of fits as a good, just plain 90s Godzilla costume, but it is specific to this film. There is also what I think was a Japanese web exclusive, but is pretty readily available here in the States, a little Godzilla, which is basically Godzilla's son grown up to about Minya size for this line. He comes with a crystal display base that's, I guess, kind of almost an accessory to Space Godzilla, which is kind of neat, and having Space Godzilla makes me want to eventually pick up that figure. But I do find it interesting that Monsterarts hit Space Godzilla so hard. It's not exactly a beloved movie, so it kind of seems like an odd choice. And now NECA is going and getting in the ring and doing a Godzilla 94. Not really sure what prompted that decision on both ends, but maybe it's a simple fact that you feel like you can go in, make that Godzilla, and then make that Godzilla again with the burning deco on him, which Bandai did not do, but I'm guessing NECA will. But it did kick off the whole Monsterarts line, and for that I am thankful, and gives me another reason to appreciate these two figures. Make sure you check me out on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And stay tuned each Monday leading up until at least May 16th when the new Godzilla film comes out. We're going to be looking at more giant monster figures. And tune in next week because I've been hitting the giant monsters hard, but I think it's time for a little Halloween in April. how about some zombies next week? So join me back next week. We're going to be raising the living dead from the grave and doing some cool random zombie reviews. See you then.